Donald Trump arrives at a border outpost expecting to see chaos, but what he steps into is a war zone. When a cartel threat emerges, he makes a shocking decision that leaves the world stunned. What happens next will change everything. The Texas sun burned fiercely over the vast desert, turning the sky into a rippling mirage of heat. At the remote Eagle Pass border outpost, the Border Patrol agents were locked in a relentless routine, chasing smugglers, monitoring the latest surveillance drone feeds, and processing a never-ending stream of illegal crossings. Then something changed. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon. A convoy of black SUVs moving steadily down the rugged desert road, their engines humming like a storm on the approach. "Expecting someone?" Agent Ryan Delgado muttered to his partner. "Not that I know of." The SUVs pulled up to the entrance, their tinted windows concealing whoever was inside. Agents instinctively placed their hands near their sidearms, tension crackling in the air. The lead vehicle's door swung open and a man stepped out. A moment of stunned silence. Then whispered disbelief. Donald J. Trump. The former president of the United States stood in the blazing heat, his unmistakable frame clad in a navy suit, his red tie slightly loosened in the desert wind. He removed his sunglasses, surveying the outpost with a sharp gaze, then turned to the dumbfounded agents. "Well," he said, clapping his hands together, "looks like I came to the right place." Agent Delgado was the first to snap out of his shock. He approached cautiously, still processing what he was seeing. Mr. President?" he stammered. "Sir, we weren't expecting you." "That's the idea," Trump replied smoothly. "I didn't come here for a press conference. I came to see what's really happening." Still caught off guard, Delgado gestured toward the facility. "Right this way, sir." As Trump strode through the outpost, agents scrambled to clear a path. They weren't used to VIP visits, at least not like this. Inside, the harsh reality of the border crisis unfolded before Trump's eyes. Cells packed with exhausted migrants, confiscated bundles of fentanyl stacked high in an evidence room, and surveillance footage showing armed cartel members moving freely on the other side of the fence. At one point, an agent pulled up a live drone feed. A group of smugglers was leading migrants through a hole cut in the border fence just miles away. Trump leaned in, watching intently. "How often does this happen?" "Every day," the agent said grimly. "Sometimes every hour." Trump turned to him. "And what's Washington doing about it?" The agent hesitated, then exhaled. "Not enough." Word spread fast. Within an hour, the outpost was swarming with reporters, activists, and local officials. Some were thrilled by Trump's presence. Others were livid. Among them was Miguel Herrera, a senior DHS official, sent by the current administration to assess the situation. His jaw was clenched as he approached Trump, his polished government badge glinting under the sun. "Mr. Trump," Herrera said tightly, "I must insist you coordinate visits like this with Homeland Security." Trump didn't flinch. "And wait 6 months for a carefully scripted tour?" He gestured around. "I prefer to see things for myself." Herrera's face darkened. "Sir, these are complex policy issues. Things aren't as simple as building a wall and calling it a day." Trump stepped closer, dropping his voice so only Herrera could hear. "No, they're not. But you know what's simple? Protecting Americans. And right now, your policies are failing." Before Herrera could respond, the sound of gunfire erupted in the distance. The entire outpost froze. Then chaos. The sharp crack of gunfire shattered the tense atmosphere. Every Border Patrol agent in the outpost sprang into action. Radios crackled with frantic voices. "Shots fired near Sector 5. Possible cartel ambush." Trump turned sharply toward the commotion, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" Agent Delgado was already moving. "Cartels test our response time," he muttered as he grabbed his rifle. "Sometimes it's a warning. Sometimes it's worse." Secret Service agents immediately formed a protective barrier around Trump. One of them, a tall, grim-faced man named Jensen, placed a hand on Trump's shoulder. "Sir, we need to get you back to the convoy." Trump held up a hand, cutting him off. "No," he said firmly. "I want to see this." Jensen hesitated. "Sir, it's not safe." Trump shot him a look. You think these guys have it safe every day? He gestured toward the Border Patrol agents rushing out of the compound. I came to see the truth. Let's go. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a reluctant nod, Jensen spoke into his radio. We're moving with him. Keep tight formation. The group piled into armored jeeps and sped toward the source of the gunfire. Dust billowed behind them as they raced through the desert terrain, the tension thick as steel. As they neared a break in the border fence, Delgado pointed ahead. There! Several armed cartel members stood near an abandoned pickup truck, their rifles slung over their shoulders. One of them was waving what looked like a white cloth, a fake surrender. This is a setup, muttered an agent, his hand tightening around his weapon. Trump narrowed his eyes. He had seen enough deals, enough power plays to recognize a bluff. What are they waiting for? He asked. Delgado exhaled. They're testing us, seeing how far they can push before we back off. Trump's gaze hardened. So don't back off. Without warning, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man in his late 40s with deep scars across his face. His cold, calculating eyes locked onto the approaching convoy. Delgado's expression darkened. That's El Cuchillo, one of the cartel's enforcers. Trump studied him for a moment, then stepped forward, ignoring the protest from his security team. Let's have a chat, he muttered. The two men stood several feet apart, the weight of the desert heat pressing down on them. El Cuchillo smirked. Mr. Trump, he drawled in accented English, you have big nerve coming here. Trump didn't flinch. And you have a big problem. The cartel enforcer chuckled. Oh, and what problem is that? Trump's voice was steady. Me? The smirk on El Cuchillo's face faded slightly. He wasn't used to people talking to him this way, certainly not politicians. You think you are still the boss of this land? El Cuchillo asked. Your government changes. We remain. Trump's eyes flicked to the rifles slung over the cartel members' shoulders, then to the patch on El Cuchillo's vest, a blood-stained emblem of the cartel's insignia. You see that flag over there? Trump gestured to the outpost where the American flag rippled in the wind. That means this is still our land, not yours. El Cuchillo's face twitched, then he laughed. Brave words, Senor Trump. Then he stepped closer and lowered his voice to a whisper. But words won't stop what's coming. Trump didn't blink. Neither will your scare tactics. Before El Cuchillo could reply, the thudding sound of helicopters filled the air. Border Patrol backup had arrived, and they weren't alone. 3 Black Hawk helicopters roared overhead, kicking up a storm of dust. Heavily armed tactical teams rappelled down, weapons drawn. Drop your weapons! An amplified voice ordered. El Cuchillo's men hesitated. Their boss held up a hand, signaling them to stand down. For now. Trump leaned in. You wanted to see if we'd back off. There's your answer. El Cuchillo studied him for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back toward his truck. His men followed, slipping into the shadows of the desert. As the helicopter circled overhead, Agent Delgado exhaled. They'll be back, he muttered. Trump nodded. Then we'll be ready. By the time Trump returned to the outpost, the media had swarmed the area. The moment had already gone viral. A reporter shoved a microphone toward him. Mr. Trump, what just happened out there? Trump dusted off his jacket. I had a conversation. With a cartel leader? The reporter pressed. Trump met his gaze. Yeah, and I told him exactly what I told you 4 years ago. We don't surrender our country. The words exploded across social media. Within hours, footage of Trump standing toe-to-toe with a cartel enforcer was being replayed on every news channel. Some called him reckless. Others called him fearless. But one thing was certain, he had just reignited the border debate in a way no one expected. Confrontation at the border had set the internet on fire. News outlets ran the footage on repeat, Trump standing face-to-face with a cartel enforcer refusing to back down. Some called him reckless, others called him fearless. His supporters hailed it as a defining moment, while his critics scrambled to downplay the encounter. Inside the outpost, the air was charged with energy. Agents who had once been exhausted and demoralized now carried themselves with renewed purpose. It wasn't every day that a former president showed up and stood in the trenches with them. Agent Delgado approached Trump with a hesitant expression. "Sir, I don't know if you realize what you just did, but..." Trump smirked. "Oh, I know exactly what I did." Delgado exhaled, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "I mean, you just made yourself a direct enemy of the cartels." Trump shrugged. "They were my enemies before, nothing's changed." As the sun began to set over the desert, a Border Patrol tech analyst rushed into the room. "Sir, we picked up cartel radio chatter," he said, his voice urgent. Trump, Delgado, and a few senior agents leaned in as the analyst played the intercepted transmission. The Spanish words crackled through the speakers, but the translation was chilling. The old man was brave. But he won't be so brave when we come for him. The room went dead silent. Secret Service agents stiffened. The threat was direct and unmistakable. Jensen, Trump's lead security officer, stepped forward. "Sir, this means we need to get you out of here now." Trump folded his arms. "We're not running." "Sir, I said we're not running." Trump's voice was firm. "They want to scare us? They want to push us out? Not happening. We stay." Jensen clenched his jaw. "Then we're doubling security." Trump nodded. "Fine, but I'm not leaving." At 2:47 a.m. Tuahau, the alarms at the outpost blared. A convoy of unmarked vehicles had been spotted approaching from the Mexican side of the border. No headlights, no radio signals. Cartel tactics. "Sir, we have incoming," an agent shouted. Trump was already awake, sitting in a briefing room. He immediately stood. "How many?" "At least 8 vehicles. Could be more." Jensen was already on the radio. "We need air support now." The agents scrambled into defensive positions. Snipers climbed onto the rooftops, scanning the desert with night vision scopes. The outpost's floodlights snapped on, cutting through the darkness. The convoy stopped just short of the border fence. For a tense minute, there was silence. Then, gunfire. Automatic rounds ripped through the air, bullets struck the fence, ricocheting off metal. Agents returned fire, their rifles barking into the night. Trump stood behind a reinforced wall watching the firefight unfold. He turned to Delgado. "You guys deal with this every day?" Delgado nodded grimly. "More than you'd think." Then, without warning, a truck burst through a weakened section of the fence. Border Patrol agents and Secret Service operatives reacted instantly, pouring fire into the oncoming vehicle. Tires exploded. The truck skidded sideways, smoke rising from its hood. 3 cartel gunmen spilled out, firing blindly. Agents took them down within seconds. Then, something unexpected happened. A 4th figure crawled from the wreckage. Not a gunman, a young boy. Delgado shouted, "Hold your fire!" The child, no older than 10, was trembling, his hands raised. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt. Trump's expression darkened. "They used him as a human shield." Delgado nodded. "Happens all the time. They send kids forward so we hesitate. Then they attack." Trump clenched his fists. "These people are monsters." Another explosion rocked the desert as cartel vehicles retreated. Air support had finally arrived, Black Hawk helicopters sweeping overhead, their spotlights locking onto the fleeing criminals. The battle was over. For now. As dawn broke over the desert, Trump stood on a ridge overlooking the border. Behind him, the outpost was still buzzing with activity. Agents securing the area, medics treating the wounded. Delgado joined him. "You really should get out of here before they try again." Trump shook his head. "No." Delgado raised an eyebrow. "No?" Trump turned to face him. "This country needs fighters, and you guys?" He gestured to the agents. "You're fighting a war no one in Washington even wants to admit is happening." Delgado exhaled. "That's the truth." Trump's eyes hardened. "Then it's time people saw the truth." At noon, Trump stepped up to a podium outside the outpost. Cameras flashed. Microphones were shoved forward. The world was watching. He took a deep breath, then spoke. "Last night, I saw with my own eyes what's happening at our southern border. Not the version politicians talk about, the real version." The reporters fell silent. "This isn't just illegal immigration. It's a war. A war on our sovereignty, a war on our communities, a war on our children." His voice rose. And what's Washington doing? Nothing. They let this happen. They refuse to act. But I promise you, America, I will act. The crowd erupted. The internet exploded. It was more than just a speech. It was a rallying cry. Trump's explosive border speech dominated the news. The White House scrambled to respond, dismissing it as a political stunt. But the footage of the cartel standoff, the gunfight, and overwhelmed border agents told a different story. Even Democratic politicians admitted Trump had exposed a real crisis. Late at night, Trump got a call from a military contact. "We intercepted a cartel message," the voice said. "They've taken migrants hostage. They're planning a public execution unless Border Patrol backs off." Trump's jaw tightened. The administration wouldn't act, but he would. Trump returned to the outpost at midnight. Surveillance showed blindfolded hostages held at gunpoint in a cartel compound. He turned to his team. "Get the media on this, now." The world watched live as the cartel panicked, loading the hostages into trucks. "They're running," an agent muttered. Trump's voice was cold. "Then don't let them get away." A covert strike team, former military contractors and off-duty agents, was ready. But they needed authorization. "The White House won't approve an operation on foreign soil," an agent warned. Trump didn't hesitate. "Then we go around them." The strike team moved in. Silently, efficiently, they took down the cartel guards, disabling vehicles and neutralizing threats. Within minutes, the hostages were rescued, every second broadcast live. The world watched in shock. By morning, the footage was everywhere. The administration was humiliated. Trump had done in one night what they had failed to do in years. At the outpost, the rescued migrants wept with gratitude. A little girl hugged Trump, whispering, "Gracias." Trump stepped up to a microphone, cameras rolling. His voice was steady. "I'm running for president, and when I win, we're taking our country back." The crowd erupted. The internet exploded. And at that moment, the world knew this wasn't just a visit to the border. It was the beginning of something much bigger.